Ms. Jane Jones, who has been a member. My name is Bill Maxey, by the way. Jane has been a member of First Congregational of Kalamazoo for a long time, but I don't know how long. When did you join?
Well, I toddled in with the toddlers when I was 2 years old, and I'm 94. 1925.
25. Christmas week, was it?
Christmas week, I stood and watched my beloved church burn to the ground. But within just a few hours, the Unitarian people at the People's Church a couple of blocks away called and said that they would be happy to share their church with us. And it meant rescheduling for them and rescheduling for us, but we were welcomed and we were grateful. In the early days, as I said, there were 3 times when it looked as if the church was going to divide into 2, which was too bad. So we developed a routine where the custodian would start getting his back trouble, and that meant that Bill, Keith, and I went down and got the tables off the racks, set them up, put the chairs around, and the next day he arrives and with the most wonderful bowls of chili. Well, you can't stand with a bowl of wonderful chili in your hand and scold somebody. So instead, we just had that routine. When he said, "My back is getting bad," he knew that it was time to go down to get one of those dinners ready.
Dr. Keith and his wife Harriet came to our house in Millwood, and I think we had gone to the church a few times, and they were aware of that, and they came to talk to us and see if we might like to become members of it. So we've been in the church well over 50 years. Dr. Phelps, I don't know just where he stood in the chain of ministers, but he was way back there. He was invited to make the primary address to the members on the occasion of the 150th anniversary. And I was responsible, of course, for the program. And I thought, my, this man is so old. I'm not sure how well he's going to do giving a speech to the congregation. And when he came to the podium, he took a little 3x5 card out of his pocket. From that 3x5 card with just a few words on it, he made an excellent presentation, spoke beautifully, and everything was great. And I had thought maybe he wouldn't be able to make it.
I'm Shirley Kishpaw. My husband and I joined the church in about 1955, give or take a little. So I've been around here a long time, and I've seen a lot of things come and go, a lot of people come and go, and I'm really enjoying the fact that there are lots more people coming lately.
Oh, yes.
And it's very encouraging to see what's happening in the church now. One of the first things I did when we joined the church was that I joined a guild, Susanna Winslow. The guilds were all named after the pioneer women, the Pilgrim women. And some of the earlier guilds were named after Priscilla Alden and Mary Cushman and some of those people, and we seized upon Susanna Winslow. And there was a book published about her, about that time, a biography, which was great fun to read. She was really a gutsy lady, to say the least. And guilds in those times were when we were young, that was our chance for a night out. And I wouldn't have missed a meeting for anything. It was a chance to leave my 3 little stair steps home with my husband and get out and live a little. So they were pretty exciting meetings for all of us, I think.
At one time, I was working in the office getting the bulletin out for Sunday and rolling one of those old grams that went around with one hand, and the other hand I had the ironing board up, and I was ironing costumes for the Christmas play because there wasn't anyone else to direct it. So I could. So here I am rolling this and ironing this and thinking, why am I doing this? But I always came back to, it's my church. That's why I'm doing it.
I don't know why so many of my memories connect with Bill Keith, but they do. And Jim Van Buckove owned Van Buckove Lumber. And he had a great sense of humor. But if you remember, Dr. Keith was rather scholarly. And on more than one occasion after the church service was over and we were saying our goodbyes and so forth and to the minister, and Jim Van Buckove would say to Dr. Keith, "Bill, what were you trying to tell us today?" But it was in good spirit, and but it was also not too far away from the target, because there were times I wondered, what was he trying to say? But he was a good man. And Harriet was such an important part of the church. She was, I think she was his right hand all the way through, and maybe more than his right hand.
I was moderator in I probably had the worst tenure of anybody, because it was in a period of trouble and transition and all that, but we pulled through, and the church went on, and I think probably grew, and maybe has prospered more because of that difficult time.
Although I had gone to a seminary, studied theology and religion, and had field work with youth groups, I had never been involved in running the church. Anyway, I said I'd preach three sermons and we could talk about it, and then some people asked me to be the minister for about a year, 15 months, I think. And for me, I had nothing else to do, and I thought this would be a chance to do something I've never done before. You know, I've never had to really call on sick people. Well, I have gone to see my friends and so forth, but I never did a church bulletin or did a wedding. Well, I did 1 or 2 weddings, but never a funeral. Funny thing is, the first funeral I did in the church, I studied it and talked to the lady that was, her husband had died, and we talked about him a lot. And I asked people in the church to write me notes about the gentleman that had just was deceased. And I gave the funeral by using the funeral book and figuring out what might be a good way to address this and give the eulogy. As I went out, the women were doing the kitchen work and setting up for a reception, and one lady said, "Thank God we have a minister who knows how to do a funeral." Well, I had no idea. I'd never done one in my life. So that was an experience too. Being a minister, I discovered, is a very difficult job in many ways. It isn't really a job like an ordinary job, but to me it was very fulfilling, because I got a chance to deepen my religious life, I'd say, because of what other people taught me. I saw real courage from people that were just, I didn't know very well, but you know, in terms of their families and illness and other problems they had in the family, it was just absolutely amazing. The strength that people had, which gave me a lot of faith. My faith increased tremendously because of that experience. It really did.
The role of men and women has changed in the church. At that time, we did a lot like all those dinners and everything, that the men just weren't involved in at all.
That's right.
And most of the committees and boards were largely men, and now those lines have blurred, and women are an integral part of all of the boards and committees, and they'd have a hard time functioning without us. And the men are involved more hands-on in some of the stuff that used to be all for women. So it has kind of equalized, and I think that's all for the good.
Our tradition historically is continuing in the way it should because of the depth of our commitment to openness and to reform movements. For example, we were the first church in the United States to ordain as an organized church a woman. And the Congregationalists founded Oberlin College, and Oberlin became a center for the abolitionist movement, and also Lane Seminary in Cincinnati no longer exists, became part of that. Harriet Beecher Stowe and so forth. That whole family came out of a Congregationalist tradition, and they worked against slavery. To be an abolitionist in the 1845 and 1850s was to be mobbed. I mean, in the North, it wasn't very popular. And the Congregationalists stood for that. Then, after Darwin's publication of The Origin of Species in 1859, and people began to talk about evolution, the church, our ministers were able to come to grips with this and support the best aspects of that in understanding the natural world and show that you could be a Christian and hold those views. And we had a number of famous preachers that were involved in that. Eventually, a man like Harry Emerson Fosdick came out of our background too. I don't know if he's actually ordained a congregational minister, but he was in a congregational church for a while. And both were people that had a social attitude in terms of dealing with problems of whatever they might be. I think one of the problems that we should be dealing with, and we are dealing with, is poverty. I think the gap between the rich and the poor and the destruction of the middle class has grown in our culture in terms of the distribution of income and help people get. And just the fact that we're doing a Martha's Table, and we're going to try to continue to do it even if we've had people back out and get other churches, is symbolic of a tradition the church has had, I think, for a long time.
Another way in which the church has changed a lot, I think, is that we've become more world conscious. We took care of ourselves and our own church, and we sent money to for missionaries that we never laid eyes on, and for educational projects abroad and all that kind of thing. I think we donated money as a church to some of the organizations in town that were doing good works, but we didn't do hands-on stuff like we've been doing in recent years with KDCCC, and then also certainly Martha's Table.
When we, in conversation, would talk about the potential for the church and the changing environment and the people moving out to the suburbs and our being the downtown church, how many people are going to want to drive from their distant homes downtown to church. And that was a concern for several years. And we had some lean years, and that was when it would really come to mind. Can we afford this big building?
And you mentioned there was some trouble. Was there troubles in the church at that time?
There's always trouble in the church. There's always a problem. There always is a problem someplace.
But one thing we did is get all the church leaders together and go out and have a meal and try to talk about what the church should do. Well, we went to Holiday Inn maybe after I'd been there about 3 months. I don't know if you went there with us or not, Dorothy. I know Dick was there. And we had a beautiful breakfast, and the whole meeting was a bust. We never got anywhere in terms of talking. We didn't get anywhere. So I was talking to Tom Burkhold and others. Let's try it again. Let's do it differently. So maybe 4 months later in the spring, we went to the Radisson and had a dinner, a lunch, at lunchtime. Everybody ate, and I brought in Charlie Gohagen. He's a psychologist and a minister, and a veteran of the Second World War. Was involved in a ship that went down. A very, very interesting man, I thought. I had him talk to my students at K College once in a while. He's a good talker. Talk about what a dynamic church needed to be. He was a minister. And we all sat there and talked, and then everybody got up and got ready to leave because it was 1 o'clock, you know. And all our dishes were there and everything. And I had a naive intuition that we shouldn't get up. I said, let's stay. Like talking to one of my kids, let's talk. And my gosh, everybody opened up. We were there till almost 2:30 or 3 o'clock. And people let loose about the things that bothered them about the church, what had happened to them, what they wanted in the church. It was kind of a moment of revelation as far as I'm concerned. I thought that was a moment that was kind of, we're going to pass over the barrier, you know.
And I'm surely happy to see how it's growing now. That is really thrilling, especially to see those little children. They are such a joy. And there was a time, I remember years ago, when there weren't more than perhaps 3 or 4 little children in the church. And so it's altogether a different place today. And it's doing so many great things.
I can remember, well, I must probably all of 6 years old, standing up on the stage and saying, I am a little red rose growing in the sun. I am as happy as can be. Summer has begun. And that there always be children in the important part of the church.